The wealth gap is getting worse.
This is the defining challenge of our time.
The super rich are getting richer.
The other 99% of workers are left to suffer.
Really? Do you suffer because these people probably make more than you?
She is the biggest earning female athlete in the entire world.
Do you suffer because these CEOs may make more than you? Does it bother you that some people have much more than others?
Yes. Average people should get higher income and buy bigger taxes for rich people.
Government can force more equality.
There should be government programs.
But is that a good thing?
Every major city which is a center of poverty is run by Democrats. The poor who suffer from that.
Equality versus liberty. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
If people are free, some will be more successful than others. Maybe they're smarter, or they work harder, or they're just luckier. Whatever the reason, in a global economy, that success gets magnified. Michael Jordan made good money playing basketball, but he's made much more money because he can do things like sell these T-shirts in China. Because of the free market, globalization, new technology, some people now have the ability to make even more off their talents. And one result of that is growing inequality. Look at this video that's caught fire on the internet. It's been viewed at least 13 million times.
Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. The top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour.
And that level of inequality is just wrong, say many people, especially people on the left, like Bob Beckel. So
I would say, you know, you said the free market handles all this. We should let the free market do that. The free market has been in place, and yet income inequality has gotten worse and worse. You ask, do people suffer because these CEOs make more money? Yes. And the reason for that is that a CEO makes 400 times what the average worker on the plant makes. If he wasn't making 400 times, that would be more money to distribute in wages. And the guy's working, you're not asking
maybe the workers wouldn't have a job if the CEO wasn't the prize.
And a CEO is worth 400 times more than the guy on the line?
That's what the market says.
Well, that's what the market says, and that's the problem with the market. What we're talking about are corporations particularly, whether it be Walmart, McDonald's, go on down the list. The top echelon of the corporate world makes an exceedingly larger amount of money than their workers do, and that is flat wrong.
But why? It's not like there's a zero-sum game, and if Bill Gates made a lot of money, that hurt people, that hurt me, or hurt the people working at Microsoft.
Microsoft paid a very, very good wage, a living wage. You think McDonald's pays a living wage? You think Walmart pays a living wage?
Yeah. People live on that wage.
No, very few of them do. They have to work 2 and 3 jobs, and Walmart is one of the most egregious of all. It's been a very successful company by ripping off people, by closing down small businesses on Main Street and doing business all the time with China, building inferior products, including
But they shouldn't do business with China?
No, if China would produce toys that weren't full of lead, yeah, that'd be fine.
It is true that we have this big gap between rich and poor, but those of us who appreciate free markets resist calls to squeeze this down. Apparently in England in 1990, you were a lord in the British Parliament, because here's Margaret Thatcher responding to your argument.
They'd rather have the poor poorer. Once they start to talk about the gap, they'd rather the gap was that. Down here. That. Not that. But that.
I agree with her, and her point, if you didn't get it, was that I'd rather have a big gap with all of us up rather than all of us together.
The problem was that rising yachts do not lift all boats. And
they lift most boats.
Well, that's not true. Let's not talk about this in terms of the very poor and the very wealthy. The very poor do have a lot of programs to help them. right? Whether it be food stamps or other things, which you don't agree with. But frankly, there's no other options for them. I'm talking about the working class in America, which, if you say the free market gave reasonable income inequality, if you would, in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Now it's just blown out of proportion in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s.
So how would you fix it? You would tax the rich more, raise the minimum wage. President Obama wants to do these things.
Oh, I certainly would raise the minimum wage. I mean, you can't make it at $7.25 an hour. It's just crazy. I think $15 an hour is a fair minimum wage. There's not been a study produced that indicates increasing minimum wage cost jobs. Not one.
Yes, there are
not. McDonald's talks about that. They find some professor they pay off to get themselves. That's wrong. That is, John, that is just not right. You have to show me definitive evidence that raising the minimum wage costs people jobs. It does not.
But isn't it just logical? If something costs more, you'll get a little less of it?
What are you talking about?
If the worker costs you $10 an hour, you're going to hire few than if he costs you $8 an hour.
Well, you're going to hire fewer? You still have to flip as many burgers, don't you?
Maybe you won't expand to the next McDonald's. Maybe you'll buy a machine.
Nobody can live on $10 an hour. They work 40, 60, 80 hours a week. And you cannot expect them to live on that kind of income, particularly when the corporate CEO is making, as they said in that film, 500, 600 times their money they work in a month that he makes in an hour. You think anybody's worth that kind of money? You think any CEO is worth that kind of money?
I'm grossed out by it, but if the market says they are, they must be, because somebody is voluntarily paying them.
The market.
Board of directors.
The board of directors, which are usually appointed by the CEO.
I think Beckel will make me more money than the next guy, so I'll pay you a lot of money.
Please.
I say the most important thing is individual liberty, and if we're free, there will be inequality. The important thing is opportunity, and we still have that in America. People born poor don't necessarily stay poor. In fact, most of the poorest fifth gradually move up. Here's part of a video made by the Institute for Humane Studies.
If we look at households in the bottom quintile in 1987 and then follow those individual households until 1996, we will see that about 45% of them have moved up to a higher quintile. About 42% of households that were in the top quintile in 1987 had fallen to a lower quintile by 1996.
You know, there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, in a good economy, people can pull themselves out of poverty worldwide. I mean, if you look at the most robust economic years in history, which were Bill Clinton's, and you look worldwide at the expansion that took place, a lot of countries that have very poor people rose out of poverty.
Yeah.
Now, I think that is a good thing. I think that's, and I agree that capitalism is a good thing. We're talking about gross inequality between those at the top who have rigged the system to make more money than those who work for them. And that's the problem I have. That's not free market capitalism. That's cronyism at its worst.
Well, crony capitalism is wrong. We agree on that, and we agree, thank you, Bob, to disagree about most everything else.
A real pleasure.
I fear most Americans agree with Bob. And with that other Bob, Robert Reich, who has a new movie out called Inequality for All.
Of all developed nations, the United States has the most unequal distribution of income, and we're surging toward even greater inequality.
So he became U.S. Secretary of Labor and made this movie.
I had to protect people from the people who would beat them up economically.
He and the left say they're standing up for the little guy. So I turned to libertarian philosophy professor Tibor Machan. Aren't they? Isn't Bob?
No way. You know, I was under communism myself in my early years.
He grew up in Hungary.
They are not helping the little guy. That is a myth. They talk a good game, but as far as delivery is concerned, the left does nothing but place ultimately people into concentration camps because nobody will comply with their stupid vision.
But neither Bob nor President Obama is putting people in concentration camps.
Not yet. Under the left, you have these people who are supposed to be getting on board willingly, but they don't come on board willingly. Very few of them do, just like with Obamacare. It's very similar.
I don't pay taxes willingly. I pay because I have to.
The point is that income inequality hurt nobody unless the inequality came about through theft or through fraud or something like that. And
is it not at all gross that some people have so much more than others?
It's not any more gross than the fact that Kobe Bryant throws basketballs much better than some of the people down on the street. It's no worse than the fact that the Kenyan marathon runners win every year over and over and over again. This is the way the world goes. And any time when you try to upset it with human meddling, you encounter what economists call the public choice problem. Namely, you put the matter in the hands of people who are just as imperfect, just as venal as anybody else. This whole idea that you can just sort of get some people up there who will set things right, manage everything. It's what Hayek called the fatal conceit. And it is fatal.
That the central planners can bring us all together, lift all the boats.
They talk a good game, but they do not deliver anything nearly as good as they sound.
Part of the talk is this moral outrage at the inequality. And you cite an example in England. There's a guy who is going to stop the rich from enjoying their privilege.
He jumped in the water when the Henley Regatta was going on because he thought that it was an elitist contest. Well, damn it, so what if it was? Golf is elitist. Tennis is elitist. Hell,
he would ban those things too. He also said that cabbies should take rich passengers on long detours.
Right. I mean, this is insane.
The media spin is that the rich get richer at the expense of the poor.
That's false.
While the richest Americans prosper, the other 99% of workers are left to suffer.
This is a story of the rich getting richer,
while the poor are now poorer.
After all, as the movie Wall Street says,
it's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. Money itself isn't lost or made, it's simply transferred.
And that's a mistake a lot of people make. It's as if they think wealth is like a pot.
Oh, do you smell that? Fresh baked pie right from the oven. Do you like a piece? Which of you gets a big piece?
In a zero-sum game, the rich take a big piece, so the rest of us have less. But in a free society,
it's not a zero-sum game. The makers who get rich by baking many more pies. I don't think people get that Bill Gates baked a lot of new pies.
Yeah, they don't get it, although Adam Smith made himself famous precisely by showing that the economy is not a zero-sum game, but that both sides at least believe they gain through exchange.
And unless they both win, the trade doesn't happen because it's voluntary.
These people tend to think that they know better and that if they were at the helm, everything would work out fine. And it never does. They know that they are smarter than anybody else. They are the guys at Harvard, at the Kennedy School of Government, and so on. They know, and whoever challenges them, the prestige is supposed to speak miles and miles. And it's all a crock.
If you had to choose between equality and liberty?
It's no contest.
Thank you, Tibor McCann. And if you'd like to keep this conversation going, go on Facebook or Twitter. Use that hashtag class warfare. Let people know what you think. Coming up, how much money does anyone need? Many Americans hate rich businessmen, but I notice they rarely hate celebrities on the red carpet who are just as rich.
Do you mind that they make millions of dollars?
No, this hasn't really occurred to me that I mind. I just like watching them.
Maria Sharapova, no wrecking ball here. She is the biggest earning female athlete in the entire world. 23 million in endorsements.
But you didn't make that. So does it bother you that she took home so much more? She's not even the best tennis player. She's ranked 4th. She makes the most money because she's a good-looking blonde. How unfair is that? And yet, I don't hear people complaining. People accept that. They accept that movie stars and singers make millions too.
Do you mind that they make millions of dollars?
No, this hasn't really occurred to me that I mind. I just like watching them.
They have a talent and they use it and they get paid for it.
Does it bother you that Tiger Woods made $78 million last year?
It doesn't bother me. If he can make it, he needs to make it.
But what about business executives?
Does it bother you that some CEOs make millions when their workers don't?
Yes, I think everybody should be treated as equal, and they should make enough money so that they can be stable and comfortable.
Why does it bother people that CEOs are rich when they're okay with Beyonce or Tiger Woods being rich? Economist J.C. Bradbury has a theory.
Entertainment is about filling us with emotions, making us excited, and we've all had some success with it. We've been in school plays, we've tried to hit curveballs and failed doing it. We understand how the things they do are so extreme and make us so happy.
We get that. We don't get what the businessman does.
Well, we see the businessman with the white shirt and the tie and making all that money. Well, what is he doing? Why does he make more than anyone else? He's showing up 9 to 5 just like I am. Why am I not making that much? So you don't get that same connection that you might have to an athlete or a celebrity.
And earlier, Bob Beckel argued that when they take that much money, they're taking it away from the workers because they could pay them more.
Well, that's what I call you used a pie example earlier, but a piñata view of the economy. We tend to think a piñata bust, candy goes out, and then one kid gets all the candy, and then, we need to take it up and give it out to everyone else. The reality is that when we try and take that and give it away to other people, we're changing the incentives. People in the economy are making money because they are doing something productive. Baseball players make a lot of money because they do something that a lot of other people can't do, and we understand that.
But the CEO? It's not so clear.
Well, part of that is because you're not head of just a local company in your town. You're head of a company that is worldwide, so that the mistakes you make have vast consequences. And there are a lot of other companies that want you to help their company. And so if you're worth $100 million a year, there are a lot of people out there, a lot of stockholders, willing to get you to come work for their company so they can make that money.
Well, I think the position taken by the owners of the Ben & Jerry, who own the ice cream company, I've got some Chunky Monkey here, it's great stuff. They said on their website during the Occupy Wall Street demonstration, the inequality that exists between classes in our country is immoral. And a few years before, Ben & Jerry said they would pay their executives no more than 5 times what they paid their lowest paid workers. But they couldn't find a CEO they liked, so they ended up paying 14 times more. He didn't work out. They had to hire somebody else and pay him even more. So these leftists, I say, are as clueless and their ideas melt. Is this a bad example? Bad metaphor?
Understanding that certain policies we adopt, good intentions aren't enough. We have to understand that we change how people behave. When people decide, well, I don't have to do something productive to succeed, I can take from other people, they're going to adopt methods for doing that instead of going and trying to do productive things. And that's something we need to avoid.
Well, we're not avoiding it in America, and I do think it's hilarious, your point, that people love the sports heroes, the actresses, actors. Robert Downey Jr., $75 million he made, according to Forbes. Beyonce, $53 million. Jennifer Lawrence, $26 million. The athletes, Tiger, it's interesting, golf, tennis, basketball, football, golf, soccer, it's well distributed. Making millions and millions of dollars, and people love them.
Right, and even when there is some outrage about these athletes' salaries, I think it's funny that they don't realize that by capping their salaries, you're just ensuring that the billionaire owners are getting more money. It's not the money going away, and it's focusing on this misunderstanding of where this wealth comes from.
Yeah, the NBA and the NFL have salary caps.
Right, and it's interesting if you want to look at how balanced the play is, because that's what they always talk about, competitive balance.
It's not like a real free market, because you want for entertainment value to have everybody relatively even. I don't care if Apple makes the best telephone.
Right, and it's interesting that baseball is far more competitive than it used to be and has no salary cap. It's actually more competitive than the NBA. It's a little bit less competitive than football, but in football you don't have, in baseball you don't have maybe a dynasty like the Patriots or the Denver Broncos or the Dallas Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers. We think about the Yankees, but we have a lot of smaller teams that are doing well. So it's not a cure-all, and there are always ways around it, and those companies that are, or those teams that are trying to make money always find a way around it.
Thank you, J.C. Bradbury. Coming up, what is fair, and why are we just talking about money? Is it fair that he's good looking? Is it fair that he was 6'4"? Didn't seem fair to me that I was the shortest kid in middle school, so I got picked on. Should government intervene? Actually, when it comes to inequality, government intervention is part of the problem, because government subsidizes rich people now. People like movie stars in Malibu. That's next. There is one thing I'd like our government to do to reduce income inequality. Stop giving stuff to rich people. In the Wall Street Journal, economics professor Walter Williams and senior economics writer Stephen Moore proposed something they call the Millionaire Subsidy Elimination Act. So, Steve, what do you mean, millionaire subsidy?
You know, we found, Walter and I, that there's $100 to $200 billion a year of your money and my money that goes to people who make over $1 million or companies that have profits over $1 million a year. So we came up with this proposal that why don't we cap these government subsidies to at least people who make less than $1 million a year? Do millionaires and billionaires really need money from the government?
No, but what are they? And Senator Tom Coburn's on your side on this. He issued a study called Subsidies for the Rich and Famous.
Well,
like what?
Okay, well, let me just start with some easy ones. I mean, when you think about Social Security and Medicare, you're thinking about benefits that go to seniors that have low incomes. But guess what? Everyone who's over the age of 65 that paid in gets Medicare and Social Security benefits, including everyone from Bill Gates to Warren Buffett. I don't know. Did they really need, a check every month from the federal government? But they're also, let me give you another example.
I mean, at least those go to everybody.
True. But, when you're running $800 billion deficits a year, can you really afford to send Bill Gates a check?
The others on your list mainly go to the wealthy.
Right. Now, these are things like farm programs. This is a classic example. The wheat subsidies, the corn subsidies, the beet subsidies. People can get benefits up to, if they have an income over up to $950,000, according to the latest law. You know what the farmers do, John? They divide up their farm among the sister, the wife. So there's 5 farms. Each one of them gets $950,000. You have some farms that are, when you combine them, are getting $5–10 million.
Another scam is the flood insurance.
Are you really a beneficiary of that program?
I confess.
Did you send the check back, or are you a hypocrite?
I built on the edge of an ocean because I was guaranteed I couldn't lose. This is insane. And yet Congress brags about its flood insurance handout, and the government spends your money to advertise it.
It can happen to you. Protect your home with flood insurance.
The flood insurance program provides valuable protection for approximately 5.5 million homeowners.
When she said that it was 19 billion in the red, now it's 30 billion in the red. So people say, oh, but I didn't plan this hurricane. I didn't know the river was going to flood, and we need to help these people. What's wrong with that?
Well, first of all, who are those people we're helping? People like you, and people even a lot richer than you are. I mean, people who are building beachfront properties, $10 million homes in Miami Beach or Palm Beach or on the West Coast.
Movie stars,
of course,
on Malibu Beach. Derek Jeter's mansion in Florida. The Kennedy family has a nice compound in Hyannis.
Right. So the question is, why should taxpayers pay to rebuild their homes? This is called what economists call a moral hazard problem. We actually encourage people to overbuild on riverbeds or beachfront properties because guess what? If there's a big storm like Sandy, guess who's going to rush in? The taxpayers to pay for the rebuilding of that house. I have a real problem with that.
And I do too. I apologize. I won't take your money. Again, I don't have a house that's insured by the government. Government also offers all kinds of subsidies to rich people who invest in what the government considers green energy, like windmills. This is the Roscoe Wind Farm in Texas. And you also get a subsidy if you install solar panels in your house.
If you want to, for instance, invest in solar energy in your home, we have tax credits in there.
Solar energy is a kind of playpen of the really rich and famous. And so when you look at homes in America that have solar paneling on their homes, they're not people in Harlem. They're people in Beverly Hills and people in some of the richest areas with the biggest homes. And here again, we have a subsidy, John, that mostly goes to millionaires and billionaires.
Those windmills we showed, the main investor was GE.
Right. And GE, you probably saw the story a few years ago that GE essentially paid no corporate income tax. And one of the reasons, you're wondering, how can one of America's most profitable companies pay no corporate income tax? And the answer to that is because they take advantage of a lot of those corporate loopholes like the solar and wind subsidy.
And one of the solar breaks is a tax credit.
Right.
But if you don't make $40,000 a year, you don't really benefit from
Well, that's the point.
So if we got rid of all of these, we'd save...
by my estimate, $100 to $200 billion a year. And I think, by the way...
And life would be more fair.
It would be fair.
Thank you, Stephen Moore. Coming up, to make incomes more equal...
Get up! Fight! Stand up! Fight! March on! Fight!
Most Americans say, raise the minimum wage. That's what these protesters want. They say they're grandmothers.
Show us some humanity, better pay.
Poverty wages have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
Unions and fast food workers have been holding lots of raise the minimum wage protests.
I'd like to fight for higher wages. I need to be able to support my family.
I want her to be able to support her family, and a recent poll says 66% of Americans want the minimum wage raised. It's now $7.25 per hour. These protesters say it should be $15 an hour. Some people told me it ought to be more.
For a minimum wage cap, let's go $20. Let's just make it 20 all the way across the board, and then companies can thrive from there.
For the moment, President Obama just wants $10.10. It is hard to live on $7.25 an hour, so who would oppose a small raise? Well, this cruel young woman does. Carrie Sheffeld's a contributor to Forbes.
Take out the knives, John. Thanks.
Rich Benjamin works for the progressive think tank Demos. And I'll start with you, Rich. You want $10?
That's a good start. I think $10 is a great start, and we know this because Washington State has a minimum wage on the order of $10, and their economy is no worse than other states who have a lower minimum wage. So yeah, I think that's great.
Carrie, what's wrong with that?
You hit the nail right on the head. That's Washington State. We need to let companies decide what wage is correct.
And you wrote an article in Forbes that made sense to me. If it's good to raise the wage to 10, why not $100 an hour?
Exactly. No, that's the point. At its very core, hiking the minimum wage is distorting the marketplace. It's basically dictating to government dictating to business what is the correct wage. That's a dangerous and very slippery slope. Why not raise that slope to $100?
Why not?
Well, if some people had their way, especially corporations, why go to 100? Why not go bottomwards to 0? Why not have fast food workers
I'm for that. No minimum wage.
And have people volunteer. Why not doing that if we not that?
Why not if people want to?
The real point is that we don't want this bottomless race to the bottom. We don't want an $8 economy jobs. We want a robust middle class, and in order for that to happen, we got to be paying folks on the order of $10 for a minimum wage. So if you wanted to, be some facetious and go on the high end, why not go on the low end?
Why is it facetious? Because if government can artificially just make everybody better off, why are you so cheap at $10?
Because $100 is an extreme, which we know would not necessarily work.
Bob Beckel earlier said there is no study that shows it'll raise unemployment. I would think if I'm forced to pay people more, I might automate, I might hire fewer people.
But essentially, all economists agree there is a cost when you hike the minimum wage. There is a cost. Everyone agrees this. The question is whether that cost is worth the benefit.
We're arguing about whether the minimum wage will cost jobs. We don't think it will at all. But what we do know is if you pay folks more, they need to consume. There's a multiplier effect. They'll be purchasers and consumers of products that are necessary. And studies have shown that if you paid people a minimum wage, that would add $15 billion to the economy for people who spend
no, that's not true.
unnecessaries.
Because you know what? You're actually going to be hiking the price of food.
You deny that a higher minimum wage will take away some jobs?
They need not take jobs. Especially, how do we know this? We know this from Costco. Costco is paying a fair wage.
Well, you could give
but
the
that's
anecdote.
Costco.
But
I mean, and that's one business.
Economists at the Federal Reserve and California Irvine did a study of the previous studies. They found 85% of the studies show minimum wage causes job loss. It just has to. If I'm a businessman, I got to pay people more. I'm going to hire a few less.
The more salient studies, to my mind, are the studies that say that low-income people who make more money will inject this money back into the commoner. And you're creating bias.
That's true. If they have more
So
money,
they're going to
they'll
have to
inject
buy
it back.
a $15 hamburger. That's what he wants.
If they have a job. Now, you used to make minimum wage, and your parents were on welfare.
Exactly.
So you feel close to this.
No, I feel this from a very personal level. And you know what got me out of that? It was not increasing the minimum wage. It was getting education. The fact of the matter is, putting the minimum wage at an unsustainable level basically perpetuates the cycle of poverty.
But let me pose the question, since you oppose raising it. Let me hit you with a question from the late Senator Ted Kennedy.
Sure.
Do you have such disdain for hardworking Americans?
Well, did Ted Kennedy ever work on minimum wage?
I don't know.
I don't think so. He certainly came from privilege. But the thing is,
giving us a false
I absolutely
choice.
have
We can walk
no
and chew gum at the same time. We can boost educational opportunity and we can pay a minimum wage.
Artificially hiking the minimum wage causes students to drop their long-term education. It gets them stuck in these very attractive, sweet-looking jobs in the short term. But in the long term, they sacrifice their long-term earning potential.
Rich,
Why would you want to incentivize that?
If conservatives, comically and facetiously say, let's make it $100, why there? You could just make the opposite argument and say, make it $0. Why not there?
But most people don't get minimum wage.
We're on the same page.
No, we're not on the same page.
But only 5% of workers are paid minimum wage. 95% don't need this government rule. And some people, if adults want to volunteer to work for $2 or nothing, why can't we be free to do that?
Why can't we be free to let children work? Why can't we get rid of our clean air laws? Because we need, in some instances, government to help us along as to what is equitable if we want a democracy. So
I'm with you on clean air, but otherwise, not the others.
Yeah.
Parents want their kids to work. If the kids are not slaves, shouldn't people have free choice?
But those 5% are an important 5%. I mean, we look out after the 5% that are making a gazillion dollars or are on the top level of the economic ladder. There's no reason why we can't look at the 5% that are earning the minimum wage. That's an important 5%.
I think the defeatist mentality about this is that there is income mobility, and you can move out of that 5%. And basically, you're incentivizing people to stay rather than work up that ladder. You're basically shaving off the bottom rungs of that ladder by hiking that standard for everyone.
This is America. America will adjust if we raise the minimum wage. And all these chicken sky are falling arguments, they just never bear out each time you raise the minimum wage.
This is creep. This is government creep.
Government creep. On that note, thank you, Carrie and Rich. Speaking of rich, as we talk about inequality between poor and rich, what is rich?
For me to be rich, I would probably have to be able to shop at Tiffany's.
Are you rich?
No.
What would it take for you to think of yourself as rich?
100 grand a year?
Maybe $1 million?
500,000. 400,000? Maybe $1 million.
Very different concepts of what it means to be rich. No one in Times Square who I asked said they were rich, and yet most were tourists who had spent a lot of money just to be in New York City. So what does rich mean in America? Who better to ask than radio host Dave Ramsey? He's spent years talking to people about money. Dave, you say Americans are richer than they know.
If your household income is $34,000 a year or more, you're in the top 1% of income earners in the world. And so by definition, most of us are rich.
I think what grosses some people out in America is that some people are so much richer than others.
I have that same tug at my heart because I've spent my life, devoted my life to helping people win with money, and I want to see folks win with money. But I have figured out that just like a golf coach, everybody's not going to be Tiger Woods, or like a football coach, everybody's not going to be Peyton Manning.
But wouldn't it be better for America if government would do things just to level the playing field, bring the rich closer to the poor, help the poor, take from the rich, give to the poor?
If we decide with moral outrage that we want to react to this unfairness, the only answer to that is the loss of freedom. And freedom and liberty, they're kind of chaotic, they're kind of messy, but they give the little man the best opportunity to win. Socialism and communism don't, and really this whole discussion is a precursor to moving us towards socialism or communism and away from liberty or freedom.
To reduce the wealth gap is socialism?
Well, to reduce it artificially by government imposition, by taking from the rich in a Robin Hood kind of a way and giving to the poor. Because what we did then is we said, okay, America doesn't work. The game is rigged. And I've got a relative that always just says, it's the corporations, it's the corporations. And like the corporations are some big boogeyman, you know? And it's not. I mean, Bill Gates started with nothing. Warren Buffett started with nothing. Oprah started with nothing. Tyler Perry started with nothing. 67% of the Forbes 400, and they're all billionaires. That's 7 out of 10 of them started with nothing. And so this idea that the thing is rigged and you can't win is, you know, that's where I really have a problem with our president when he says this, because he says he doesn't believe in freedom, he doesn't believe in capitalism, and what he's really saying, the underlying tone of this whole philosophical argument is we have to move towards government intervention to prevent this unfairness.
If you look back at household income over the years, Americans have gotten richer. In 1901, the average was, the income was $750, but in today's dollars, $20,000. In 47, when I was born, $31,000. Today, twice that, $62,000.
Yeah, my first year out of college, I made $18,000. 3 years later, I was making $250,000. The next year, I made $6,000, and so on. And so, you know whose fault all of that was? Mine. Every one of those things were my fault when it was working and when it wasn't working. Yes, I'm in an environment and I've got opportunity and I believe, but this idea that what we really have is not a crisis of inequality. We have a crisis of belief that we can go into this marketplace and win. And when we sell young people on the idea they can't succeed because the game is rigged, we're selling them that socialism is the answer.
But there is a big difference in the game. I had 2 parents. I was able to go to a good high school. Many people have a much harder start.
Well, they do. Some people start from different places than others. We all have different sets of challenges. Dave, I had a guy on Twitter really angry with me the other day because I was talking about this stuff. Dave, you don't understand. You're a middle-class white guy. You started with an advantage just with that. And yet I got a young man working for me that's African-American that's making a lot of money, doing a beautiful job, and grew up in a single mom's home in the projects. So this is absolutely ridiculous. The idea that you cannot win in this marketplace because you can find plenty of excuses. Hey, I'm bald. You got great hair. I can find an excuse, really. I mean, it's not fair. It's not an even distribution of hair.
It's not fair. All right. Well, thank you, Dave Ramsey. Coming up, what is fair, and is it all about money? I say it was unfair that I got picked on when I was a little kid because I was extra small. I want a government program to protect late bloomers. That's next. These people are rich. Many are multimillionaires. And yet, well, they smile and pose on the red carpet. Other Americans struggle. How is that fair? And the gap between rich and poor keeps increasing. Today, the richest 1% of Americans own a third of America's wealth. 1% own 35%. That's just not right, say many Americans. And that wealth difference is a reason for the minimum wage protests.
Fight! Get up! Fight! Stand up! Fight! March on! Fight! Fight on!
It was a reason for Occupy Wall Street and so on.
Corporate greed has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Corporate greed has
Of course, that sign is absurd. 99% of Americans are not poor. But in a rich country, what is fair? The author of the new book, The Baby Boom, expanded my thinking on the concept of fairness. P.J. O'Rourke wrote, "Freedom is not fair. I have a 13-year-old daughter. All I hear is, it's not fair, it's not fair. I say to her, honey, you're cute. That's not fair. You're smart. That's not fair. You were born in the United States. That's not fair. You better get down on your knees and pray that things don't start getting fair for you." Good point. The movie stars on the red carpet are not only rich, but they have other advantages. Jennifer Lawrence is pretty and talented. George Clooney is much smoother and better looking than I am. What's fair about that? I want to be a pro basketball player. It's not fair that LeBron James is so much taller than I, and stronger and more skilled too. It's not my fault that I'm just 5'9", and it's not fair that I matured late, so I was tiny in school. And I got picked on because I had a little kid voice when every other boy's voice had changed. That was definitely not fair. Maybe what America needs is a handicapper general. Kurt Vonnegut suggested that in his book Harrison Bergeron. You know, a government official like the Surgeon General or Attorney General who would make sure no one has an unfair advantage over anyone else.
The strong wore weights to make them weaker. The intelligent wore earpieces that kept them from taking unfair advantage of their brains. Even the beautiful sometimes wore masks in situations where their beauty might simply be too distracting.
The idea of redistributing income to the poor seems more reasonable, especially when some Americans are so rich. But the truth is that the fate of most of the poor does not, fortunately, depend on government. The world's best poverty fighter is free market capitalism. Capitalism is held in withering contempt in newsrooms and at universities, but capitalism is what's allowed millions of people to lift themselves out of poverty. Fools in the media say capitalism serves the rich at the expense of the poor. But that's not true. When everyone is free to trade, free markets give more people the power to prosper. In many ways, markets are the big equalizer. Money doesn't care if you're black or white or brown. The people at the bottom need capitalism most. Our partial free market is why, even as government poverty programs fail, poor people in America don't suffer the way the poor suffer in most of the world. In America, even people at the bottom of the ladder do pretty well. One of our health problems is obesity. You know, you live in a good place when one of the biggest problems is that we're too fat. Free market capitalism does allow some people to get much richer than others, but that's okay. Inequality may seem unfair, but the alternative is government force. That leaves everyone poor. That's our show. See you next week.